everybody, and welcome to American AVK. This is the 2780 how-to. We're coming to you live from Minden, Nevada, our manufacturing facility here behind me. So today we're going to show you guys a couple things on how-to with the 2780. First being the extension kit, as well as op nut adjustment, lubrication maintenance, rotation of this upper nozzle section, and nozzle replacement on either the hose or the steamer or pumper. So one of the first things you want to do when you get out to a hydrant, we always talk about safety. Safety is one of the big things, and you never can be too safe. So when you get out to the hydrant, you're going to do an extension kit. You want to go ahead and shut off the isolation valve. You want to kill the water pressure. Then you want to come over here. You can take off your pumper nozzle, crack open the hydrant, make sure you don't have any pressure. Once you establish that everything's good, go ahead and close the hydrant back up and you're good to go. So let's go ahead and go over here to the table and talk about the extension kit. So on this hydrant today, we're going to put on a 6-inch extension kit. So I want to go over kind of an unboxing. We've already unboxed it, but here's what we got. You're going to get 5 additional stainless steel bolts. These are for the extension kit itself. They're going to be the bolts, the washers, and the nuts. Now the nuts are Teflon coated, and that's to prevent anti-galling as well as double corrosion resistance. Now one thing we like to point out, once you use these Teflon bolts, it's a stainless steel and it's actually coated with Teflon. Once you use them about 3 to 4 times, the Teflon will start coming off of the threads, and then it's no longer gall resistant. So just always take that into consideration. You want to try to do this one and done. Be done with it. On with other things that come with it, you're going to have a berry tag. As I mentioned, 6-inch, or this is an extension tag. You have a 6-inch extension tag. This is going to come with it. If it was 1 foot, 2 foot, vice versa, this would be different. You're going to get an extension stem, stainless steel, so it matches the stainless steel upper stem in the hydrant, as well as you're going to get an additional brake coupling, and this is stainless steel as well. Now some people ask us, why do you get another brake coupling? Well, the reason we do that is we just throw in another brake coupling so there's no confusion that there's always a brake coupling where it belongs. So instead of actually putting in an extension coupling, we're just giving you another brake coupling. That way, if something were to happen and they got switched, there's no problem. The brake coupling is where it belongs. You're also going to get a snap ring. This is one of 2. And the other one is going to be already installed on the extension itself, along with one of 2 5-bolt flanges. You're going to get 2 barrel gaskets. One is going to replace the barrel gasket that's on the base of the hydrant, and the other one is for the extension itself. We gave you 2 because we want you to go ahead, since you're torn the hydrant apart, go ahead and put a brand new one on the base of the hydrant. And then here's the other 5-bolt flange for the extension kit. So you're going to have 2 of those, and I'll get into all that here once we get into the installation. Now we'll move over here. Some tools you're going to want. You're going to need 19mm, 24mm wrenches, a pair of needle nose, Allen wrenches, a small pry bar is good to have. And another thing we like to let people know, you can also use standard 3/4 or 15/16. So what AVK did is we went and found the perfect bolt that can work for both SAE and metric. So whether you're in Canada, the US, or the Caribbean, you'll have a wrench in your toolbox to take this hydrant apart. You're also going to need the AVK hydrant op wrench, as well as a T-handle wrench. So now, let's move back over to the hydrant, and I'm going to show you guys how we tear this apart. Now, like I said before, we've established that we don't have any pressure on this. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take off the weather shield. You're going to take one of your Allen wrenches here. You're going to take out this stainless steel bolt that's in the top. This fastens down the weather shield. Now remember, weather shields are standard on AVK hydrants, both the 2780 and the 2700. I like to flip that over, make it like a little cup to keep my small parts in. You're going to take another Allen wrench, and on top of here, holding the thrust nut in a locked position is a locking plate. This is for the thrust nut adjustment. You're going to take this locking plate off. Again, that's stainless steel there. I set it inside the weather shield. Now you're going to take your op wrench, and we're going to take this thrust nut and op nut completely out of the bonnet. Now I'd like to take a minute to talk about, this is a two-piece unit. And the reason I want to mention that is because there's two different pieces in here, and in case they get separated out in the field, you'll know which goes where. This is your thrust nut, this is your op nut. In between those two is what we call a roller bearing. So you always want to make sure, if this happens to get separated out in the field, that the roller bearing goes in between the thrust nut and the op nut. Then down inside the bonnet, right before the lubrication chamber, is a nylon washer. This is an anti-friction washer. You want to take all those out. And now we're going to move down into the bonnet to the lubrication chamber. This is where you're going to take your T-handle wrench. You can see it's got a wrench side on it. We're going to drop it down inside the bonnet. You're going to break off the traveling stop nut that's down in there on the upper stem. Now this takes a pretty decent amount of rotation to get it out of there. And then there's your traveling stop nut. So we now remove that. Now I want to discuss real quick, we have two options on our hydrants. You can have grease filled or oil filled. So let's say this is oil filled and you want to attempt to save the oil. We do have this oil sleeve available, which will slip down, and then it goes inside the lower part of the lubrication chamber. And then what we're going to do is, you're going to take your 19 mil, and for the sake of this demo, I only have 2 bolts tightened. But you're going to undo these bolts. And I'd like to mention that these bolts are available. They come standard. They come standard in a zinc plated, but the option to have stainless steel, either 304 or 316, is available. So pretty much everything below ground is standard stainless steel, and then above ground you have the option to go with stainless steel. So we're going to take these 6 bolts out of the bonnet. And then you can insert this oil sleeve in here, and what that's going to do is keep the oil inside the bonnet, lubrication chamber. In the case of it being grease, you're just going to take it out because the grease is going to stay packed in there. Now, when you go to take this bonnet off, usually I've got to give it a little bit of a twist, and then when you pull up, you'll feel it break loose of the upper stem. You want to take special care not to drag it too hard across these threads, because there's 2 O-rings in the bottom of the lubrication chamber. One O-ring is to keep the oil or grease in, and the other O-ring is to keep the water out, contaminants. Also, I want to see, Parker, if you could zoom in on that, on this bonnet. You'll see this little ridge here. This is for the barrel gasket. That way it always sits in there in the correct position, and it makes it a lot easier when you're putting this back on. Also, back over here at the barrel, you'll see this raised area right here. This is for this barrel gasket to sit on. And you see it doesn't move. It stays right there on there. Makes things a lot easier when it comes to installation. and if you're doing it yourself. So one thing I like to mention, I keep that bonnet gasket on top of the bonnet so I don't forget to put it back on when you're putting this back together. So now we got the bonnet all taken apart and we got this hydrant pretty much ready to go. We're going to move down to the lower part of the nozzle to the base. You take your 24 mil and you're going to break these bolts loose. Now once you do this and you get all 4 bolts broken loose, you'll notice the traffic flange will drop, and that's okay, that's going to happen. So we take these 4 bolts out. So now you see we have one of the bolts has the berry tag from the original, when it was originally produced. What I like to do now is take another bolt and go ahead and put on the extension tag. That way I don't forget to do it, and it's on there. So now once both of these are reinstalled, you can see it's a 1-foot bury with a 6-inch extension. So now what I'm going to do is we're going to take this nozzle section off. I'll have Parker help me do that. Okay, now that we got this off, I want to show you real quick. Again, we have another cast groove in here on the bottom of the base of this nozzle section. That again is for the other barrel gasket to sit in there, and it makes it a lot easier when lining this up, as well as it lines up on the piece of ductile. So we like to point that out on the base of this hydrant. And as you can see, the inside's coated, really good quality. All right, so now we've got the nozzle section off. You'll take your barrel gasket off, set it aside, take your pry bar. We're going to take the first snap ring off. Then we're going to take this traffic flange off. So this is the 4-bolt traffic flange. So what you want to do with this is take this off and set it aside. Kind of forget about it for right now until the extension's installed. This is where sometimes there's a little confusion. When we start talking about putting the extension on, we have a 5-bolt flange versus the 4-bolt flange. So the reason we opted to do this was so that this can be put back together correctly. You won't mistakenly use this 4-bolt flange as a part of the extension. So this hydrant has to be put back together so it can be properly in operation for a traffic incident if it was impacted. Let me get all my bolts and everything. So now, take one of your 5-bolt flanges. Now when you put this back on, you want the casting numbers that are on it, you want that facing down. Because you want this ridge in here that's going to grab this snap ring to be facing up. So when you put this back together, make sure that the casting numbers are facing down. Go ahead and put that down. Pop on your snap ring, just like that. Make sure it's good. Then what we do is move on to the stem. So now we're going to put this piece of extension stem on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the top pin out. You want to be careful here so you're not dropping parts all the way down. Like if you got a 4-foot berry, that thing's lost. So we're going to take out the top pin. And this is our stainless steel upper stem. It's all one solid piece. Go ahead and set it aside. Take your extension stem right here and drop it in the other brake coupling. Refasten it with the pins, snap pin, and then one thing I like to show, if you could zoom in here, Parker, on this pin, we like to tell you guys to push this all the way through. Go past this point and go to that point. That way when there's velocity and this water is really rushing, and if that's sitting there, I mean, there's a lot of water and a lot of velocity running through there. You never really have to worry about this coming out. So just one little more step to be safe. Then you take out the extension stem pin and drop in the original upper stem. Okay, now we're going to fasten it in there. Lock that in there real good. Now that's all put together. When you got this apart, you can go ahead and check that the lower pin on the original traffic brake coupling. You can go ahead and check it, make sure that pin's in good shape and everything's good to go. All right, now we have that all together. We're going to take another barrel gasket. You're going to put it on top of the original piece of ductile. Now we're going to take the actual extension, and again, this comes pre-assembled like this when you get it out of the box, but always double check. Again, now on this one it's going to be flipped because now we're pushing down. You want to make sure the casting numbers are facing you. So, and then of course the snap ring is installed properly. We can put this on. Drop your 5 stainless steel bolts down through the upper flange. Now bring your lower flange up, give it a little pinch, put your washer, your Teflon coated nut on there, and then install the nuts. Now once you got this done, we recommend you use about 60 foot-pounds of torque on it with a torque wrench. And for the sake of this demo, we're just gonna cinch these up. What you want to do is a star pattern. Basic mechanics here. Okay. Now we've got the extension actually installed. All right, you're going to take your traffic flange. Now this comes back into play. So you want to make sure it literally says on here, this side up. So please take special caution and make sure it says this side up, because if you actually install it this way, when you go to tighten this up, it'll actually pull itself right off of that snap ring. So you want the part that says this side up, facing up. And that's because of that ridge in there. It's going to grab this snap ring. And I like to check it. There we go. Now we're going to put our new barrel gasket on. Set it on there. And now it's time to put the nozzle section back on. Okay, you just set it on there. Find that ridge. We're good to go. Now you're going to take your 4 bolts. Remember, you got the 2 with the 1 extension tag, 1 bury tag. You should put those in the back. You bring your traffic flange up. Pinch it in there. And then again, once you get these all in and you get the nuts on them, you'll want to torque these to just about 60 foot-pounds as well. Now again, for the sake of the demo, I'm just going to throw 4 on these, speed things up a little bit. Or I'm going to put 2 on. All right. Now we've got this back together. Now it's time to move back up to the upper section of the nozzle and put the bonnet back together. What you want to do is put your bonnet gasket back on there. Take your bonnet, slide it back down over the upper stem. So here's something I want to point out. There's the greaser. Make sure the greaser or the oil plug is facing away from traffic. So let's pretend this nozzle's right at the curb. You want that at the back. And we like to think of that as another small safety feature that keeps your crew off of the street. If this was like that on the street, he's got his back to the traffic, maintenance in this. We want those guys off the street. So we always put it back away from the street. Now put your 6 bolts back in. Now this part is very critical to putting the op nut back in. What you want to do is you're going to put the nuts back on. You're going to leave the bonnet loose. You don't want to tighten it quite yet. Come back to the op nut and thrust nut. Make sure you put your anti-friction nylon washer back down in here. Oh wait. Traveling stop nut. Don't forget the traveling stop nut, as I almost did. You want to put it back in. And I like to get it started a good many turns. Now, spin this back down on here. You don't need to over tighten this either. Just get it down there till it hits the bottom of that lubrication chamber. Give it a little tap there and it's good to go. Now we put the op nut in. Anti-friction washer there. Drop that in. Then we start this. I can take the op wrench and you just start to spin it. So what we're doing now is we're letting this thrust nut and op nut center itself on the bonnet. It'll push the bonnet left or right, to and fro, however it needs to center up properly. What you do is you get it down on there, and I'd like to discuss, this is got what's called a Higby cut. So as soon as it goes down, it's going to find that thread. The Higby cut is actually a square cut on the thread. Instead of it being a point, there's actually a square plane, and that allows it to hit the thread on the bonnet and just keep going. You don't have to really worry at all with cross-threading this. But what you want to do is get that started. Once you see it's started to thread in there, you can see it's in there. Now, tighten this up. Tighten up your bonnet bolts so you pull everything together. If you go and tighten this down first, what's going to happen is there's a possibility you're going to have a gap because you get this all the way cinched down tight. Then you go and tighten these and then pull it down even more, and you can create incorrect spacing in there, and it might not actually be as tight as it should be. So what we're going to do here, we just have that in there, just started, the threads are just starting, and then we cinch down the bonnet. Again, just for demo purposes, we did 2. Now you go ahead and tighten that down, but you don't, the thing with our thrust nut is you don't need to wrench it tight. This thrust nut's basically a brake for the op nut. So you just want to get it tight till it's snug. Check the alignment with the alignment screw, which we'll show you here in a minute, and you're going to have to probably back it off a little bit. This one I had to back off barely a quarter turn. And now I can put in my lock plate. Okay, now my lock plate's in. So this looks all done. Give it a glance over. Make sure all your bolts are tightened. If you want to go through and double check the torque on all of them, go ahead. I want to mention the bonnet bolts. We recommend about 40 pounds on the torque for those. So you want to check everything. Now at this point, you can go ahead and open up the isolation valve, make sure your caps are on, pressurize this hydrant, make sure you don't have any leaks at the extension, the base, or the bonnet. If you don't have any leaks, you're good to go. You did it right. Now, here's something that happened. While you were getting ready to test it, you're turning this op nut. And you're like, man, that's really tight. I don't like how tight that is. Or after you got done and you put the weather shield and everything back on and left, you get a call from the fire department. They're like, hey, that hydrant out on Rose Street is really hard to operate, really tight. Now I'm going to show you how we can adjust this. So what you want to do is, it's closed. Again, we do the same thing as we taking the hydrant apart. You want to take this lock plate off. So let's say this was hard to operate. We want to back some pressure off of this op nut. What you're going to do is take your op wrench again, and let's say we're going to back this off a good quarter turn. That should be good. Let's see if I can wheel this closer here to Parker. So, now we've backed this thrust nut up a good quarter turn. Now originally, that thrust nut was right there. Right at the corner of the thrust nut. So when I went to put it on originally, I put that corner right here. So it sits right there. Now, we've gone and backed it off a decent quarter. But now we're not at the point anymore. So that's where these two sides and this flat plane on this, these two sides and that flat plane on this come into play. Now we can put this straight against the side where it's hugging two corners of the op nut. So our design idea there was it gives you a lot more options for backing this off and adjusting it. You don't have to always get it the exact spot that this lock plate wants. You have a lot more variables on it. So now you got it all taken care of and you got it adjusted. Let's spin this around. Now, as I said before, if this was oil filled and we pulled that out and we didn't use the oil sleeve, we just lost all the oil in the lubrication chamber. This next how-to part is how to do lubrication maintenance on this or refill this in the case of maintenance like we just did. So, what you're going to want to do, this one is already set up. This is a greaser. So you're always going to have your weather shield off. When your weather shield's off, you want to make sure the hydrant's closed, and because you want this op nut to be in the correct position so the capacity of the lubrication chamber is correct. So if you have this hydrant open and the isolation valve's off and you have it open, you're actually changing the position of the op nut and it changes the capacity. So what you want to do is make sure that this is closed, the hydrant's closed. Hook up your greaser with the weather shield off and start pumping grease into it. Once you see grease come up here on top of this breather, there's a breather hole on top of this op nut. Once you see the grease come out, then you know it's full. Now remember, always use food grade grease or oil. So now, let's talk about if this was oil filled. Well, it's not going to have a greaser. It's going to have an oil plug. So now this is a little reverse. So again, weather shield off. You got your oil plug right there. What you're going to do this time is you're going to take the oil plug out. Then you're going to take food grade oil, which you can get 8-ounce bottles from us, and you're going to pour it in the top of the op nut. Once you see oil start coming out of this, you know you're full and you're good to go. Then you just put your oil plug back in, snug it up, then put your weather shield back on. So, there you go. Your hydrant's good to go. Let's get this over here for you, Parker. And it's back in service. So that knocks out 3 how-tos. We went over the extension kit, as well as the adjustment on the op nut and lubrication maintenance. Now these guys, they just put this extension kit on. You get a phone call. The nozzle's pointing the wrong direction. It's pointing at the guy's driveway or it's pointing at a tree. Now you got to go out and rotate the nozzle because when they put it back together, they just threw it on and rolled with it. So now I'm going to show you guys how you adjust the nozzle. We're going to turn this. So what you want to do again, safety first, shut off the water, break open the cap, open the hydrant, bleed off the pressure. Close the hydrant back up, okay? Then you're gonna wanna take your wrenches, move down to the base, and we're gonna loosen the 4 bolts. Now you're just gonna loosen them. Just back off the nut a little bit. You don't take them all the way off. Then you're gonna take your op wrench and we're gonna open the hydrant. We recommend about 3 turns. You wanna go about 3 turns. Now what I'm doing here when I'm turning this, 2, 3. What I've done now is the way the mechanics of this work, I've now kind of spread out the hydrant from the lower barrel by opening it up because I've pushed and I've actually lifted this up. So now what you do is you get behind it right here in the hose nozzles and rotate it. Now I got it pointing the direction I need it. The curb's here now. Now we're good to go. Now go back, take your op wrench, close it, and now what I'm doing is I'm pulling the hydrant back together. You just snug it up. So now what I've done is pulled it back together. Now I go back down to the base. Tighten up my 4 bolts. Make sure my caps are on good. Open the isolation valve back up. Pressurize the system. Make sure this is sealed down here at the base. And now you're rotated. That's how simple it is to rotate this. And you can actually rotate this 360 degrees. Either way. So super, super easy to maintain these. So now let's roll. Let me unlock this. Where am I going? Right there. Now I'm going to show you guys how to replace the actual threaded nozzle of the 2780. So basically snug that up a little bit, okay? Now, on your hydrants in your field, or when you get them new, you're not going to see this set screw. You got a set screw at 9 o'clock, and then there's a set screw underneath here at 5 o'clock. So, many years ago, we only have 1 set screw. So there is a chance an older hydrant of yours has only a single set screw, but all of the new ones now have a double set screw in them. So what you're going to do is you'll see a small little blemish, but what we do is we Bondo these, and then we coat them with the enamel so you can't see them. So what you're going to have to do is you'll be able to see at the 9 o'clock and 5 o'clock position just a small little blemish. You'll take like a flat head and then just chip off that enamel, and then you kind of dig out with a little pick. You can dig out the Bondo, and then you'll see the set screws. So what you want to do then is back them off, bring them about 3/4 out. We'll do that as well on the one at 5 o'clock. And then you're going to turn this clockwise. And then boom, it comes out just like that. So this is the design on these nozzles is either, we call it a split lug or a 5-lug system. So you can see you got 1, 2, 3, and then 4, 5. You got this split lug right here. And then can you see on the hydrant, you've got a split right here on that lug. What happens is these two here, these 2 lugs here line up right there. So when you go to put this back together, you'll want to grease with a food grade grease. You want to grease this O-ring, and you'll want to grease the inside track. Just make things easier. Then you slide this in, and then counterclockwise, less than a quarter turn. It might be hard to see, but we have a little black mark on there. There's actually a punch. When these are machined, they put a small punch right there. That small punch, actually, can we get on that, Parker? Right there is the exact center of this split lug. So the reason that's there is so you know where the center is, so you can line up this set screw at the 5 o'clock position. And all you want to do when you're reinstalling this is snug them up. Don't over tighten them, because what you can do is you can actually push this nozzle to one side or the other, and then that can create a leak. So what you want to do is just snug them up. You don't need to torque on them at all, because once this set screws in here, especially in a split lug, this nozzle's not going anywhere. That's locked in there. Put your hose cap back on, and then open up your hydrant and make sure you don't have any leaks. The process I just showed you on this hose nozzle goes for the steamer, pumper, and the other hose. So you follow the same things. There's a set screw at the 9 o'clock and 5 o'clock on all 3 of these. So, that is the how-to on the 2780. We're gonna open up this was fine. We're gonna open up the floor to questions. If you guys got any questions,